So that, okay. Sorry, we have to put back the microphone on the side. She's the boss. That's it.
All right. Nem szép, vagy pedig?
Hát rakd a szélre te is, szerintük azt gondoljuk. Igen, ennyi. De innentől már rendben is lesz. Oké. Figyelj, 10 percünk van.
Indulunk?
Igen, 10 percünk van, 15 maximum, mert nekem mozgóba is kell menni utána.
Indulunk?
Most vonatra.
Oké.
Jó, 16 ember online van. You only have 15 minutes and counting.
Give me a signal. Are we live? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Yes, is it okay now? You hear me? Okay. Okay, good.
Facebook Live indult? Magyarul akkor szóljak, vagy nem? Oké. Jó reggelt kívánok! Ez egy nemzetközi sajtótájékoztató, Berlinben vagyunk, a Potsdamer Platz és a Brandenburg kapuk között Márki-Zay Péterrel, és sajtótájékoztatóra nagyon sok időnk nincsen, és ez egy nemzetközi sajtótájékoztató, amit angolul tartunk, so I will switch to English. So very well welcome. This is a hybrid press conference with the candidate of the Hungarian opposition, Péter Márki-Zay, and there are a handful of journalists here in Berlin, but many of you are connected through the screens all over Europe and all over the world. So welcome, and please raise your hand if you want to ask a question. I already see 2 and 3. And first of all, I would like to ask you, it was a very dramatic day yesterday, and you met a lot of German politicians. What were your impressions about Hungarian-German relations and the implications in this European crisis?
First of all, we met with a minister and 2 state secretaries, the heads of governing parties. Representatives of all 3 governing parties. What I experienced is great support for a regime change in Hungary. I have the impression that they all consider Orbán to be a traitor of the European values, but also a traitor of the European community. They are very much concerned that Orbán might serve Putin's interests, like he vetoed several European initiatives criticizing China for their treatment of minorities and democracy, of course. And I had to reassure our German colleagues, because yes, I also consider Orbán to be a traitor in that sense, but I'm not afraid. I don't think that Orbán is there to veto sanctions against Russia. He never vetoed sanctions against Russia in the last 10 years since the Magnitsky Act. And apparently even yesterday, they expressed that Orbán will not veto sanctions concerning the Ukrainian crisis either. So on one hand, yes, he was serving Putin's interest, Russia's interest concerning the International Investment Bank, the spy bank. He was extraditing Russian criminals to Russia instead of the United States. He talked about a military exercise with China. He's allowing Chinese investments against Hungarian interests in Hungary. So there are many examples of him being a traitor and betraying Hungary and European Union, bringing in migrants, criminals to the Schengen zone, to Europe, known Islamist terrorists as well, granting asylum to Gruevski, and I could go on and on. But I can reassure everyone that in this, our impression at least, is that in this Ukrainian crisis, Orbán will go along with the European and NATO interests. So at least this much we can be optimistic of.
I would like to take the first question from the international public, from Daniela Weber from Radio Luxembourg over Zoom.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much for the floor. Hello, Mr. Márki-Zay. We know each other from Hungary when I came to cover the election campaign. My question today is on the conditionality mechanism. You know, there has been a ruling last week. This mechanism has been decided, but not properly triggered yet. And my question is, how important would this mechanism be? What do you expect from the mechanism? Do you expect anything before the election date? yeah, what is the expectation here, since some people say that if it's triggered before the election date, Orbán could use it for its own purpose, for his anti-EU speeches. What's your analysis on that? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, first of all, for Orbán's use of the conditionality mechanism or any other European stance on Hungarian issues, if Orbán is being criticized for being illiberal, it is strengthening Orbán because he's proud of it. If Orbán is criticized being corrupt and stealing from his own nation, it doesn't help Orbán. So this conditional mechanism, as much as I understand, is criticizing Orbán for stealing from his own people and from European taxpayers. And Europe and the European Court of Justice, Court expressed his criticism against Orbán's corruption and lack of rule of law. And this was the reason of this ruling. And of course, it doesn't help Orbán. No, this one is a shame for Orbán, even back home in Hungary. He cannot be proud of it. And if it influences elections, it will probably doesn't help Orbán, because people can now be assuming that Hungarians will lose billions of euros thanks to Orbán's corruption. So if anything, it will probably move electors away from Orbán more towards the united opposition.
Thank you. One thing I forgot to mention, which is quite crucial, is that we literally have a train to catch. So we will have to finish it by 12. But I would like to take the next question from the room, because you raised your hand.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'm Rob Schmidt. I'm the Central Europe correspondent for National Public Radio based in the United States. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned in the conversation earlier that you consider this campaign mission impossible. You seem certain that there will be electoral fraud. What is your plan of action if and when that happens, and if and when the day after the election things aren't looking great for your opposition?
Well, first of all, we already completed a few missions impossible, but it's now we are intent on doing the same. So, for example, we have to safeguard a free election by stepping up against electoral fraud, and, for example, we offer the reward for those people whose votes are being bought, who are bribed to vote for Fidesz, if they can give us a proof. And everybody has a smartphone in his pocket, even the poorest man nowadays in Hungary. So they can give us proof, and if it stands up at court, then we will give them a 3,000 euro reward, 1 million hope, which is certainly larger than those 20, 50 euros what Fidesz is paying for a vote, allegedly. So I think this one is very important. On the other hand, we will also have two election monitors from our own activists in every single voting station. This was not the case 4 years ago, when half of the 10,000 voting stations didn't have any independent monitors. So this is the most important thing that we can do.
Thank you. Luc André, please. Next one from L'Opinion. Are you unmuted? You're unmuted, sorry.
Yes, now, some economic experts said that next Hungarian government will have to do a step toward austerity to cut spendings. What are your views on that, please?
Well, first of all, we will be more frugal in certain areas and more gracious in other areas. So we will certainly not save money on paying policemen, on paying teachers and nurses, hospital nurses. But we will save a lot on corruption, because we will have to step up against corruption. We will stop these prestige projects of Fidesz. We will not build a stadium in Osijek, Croatia, for the 0.91% Hungarians living there. In fact, Orbán is building the stadium for his friend and purse, basically, Mészáros Lőrinc, who owns the football team in Osijek. We will definitely not spending on building further stadiums or moving the finance ministry from the Pest side to the Buda Castle, costing 80 billion. We will definitely save a lot on building roads, for example. there's a 40-kilometer section of a highway between Osijek and Mohacs, Hungary, 20 kilometers on the Hungarian side, 20 kilometers on the Croatian side. Croatian 20 kilometer cost 20 million hoof. The Hungarian side cost 88 billion hoof. So this 4 times being more expensive. You know, if you're just, I would say, as transparent as the Croatians are, we would save 68 billion, about more than 80%, about almost 80% of the cost just by not stealing. And this one is a huge savings on the Hungarian economy. If you use European funds, Hungarian funds, and efficiently for the benefit of the nation instead of diverting it to Orban and his family, you know, we will already do everything. And I already proved my capabilities as an economist, as a manager in Hungarian German, where we reduced taxes and repaid previous debts, and the development of the city didn't stop. So, and we also made public transport free for locals. So basically, we have already proven that by being smarter and not stealing, we can develop Hungary without any austerity measures.
Next one on the list is Martin Ehl from Hospodářské noviny in the Czech Republic, please.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask about the campaign, about what kind of topic you consider would be most important to approach, especially those undecided voters. According to some estimations, it's about 40% of voters are still not decided. And how do you want to approach the countryside voters? Because according to some expertise, this is the place where the elections will be decided. So if you have something special to offer them in the campaign, and how do you want to make the campaign there?
First of all, our program would benefit rural population as well as city populations and the people living in Budapest. So this one is good, a sustainable economic development, an improved healthcare, more secure policing with more people, a education system with higher wages, but also more freedom for the teachers would benefit all regions of Hungary, no doubt about that. The question is, what's more important, how do we get this message to the people? How do we counter all those fake news and smear campaigns, hate campaigns that Fidesz is conducting against us? And this is the difficulty. We have much less resources. We are not allowed into public media. Outdoor advertisement companies are not allowed to sell us their surfaces. So there's and Fidesz outspends us 10 to 1 and sometimes 50 to 1 on social media. So that is the biggest difficulty. And and even Fidesz is paying for their activists. We are, of course, relying on volunteers. But grassroots, that's the only way we can get our message to people living in more isolated areas, so to say, where people can only access to public Fidesz media, basically.
Thank you. Viva Termansen, please. And after that question, we can take one last one.
Thank you. I'm Viva Termansen from Denmark. If you win the election, which is a very big task, if you win the election, then you will sort of have achieved the biggest common goal of your coalition, of your very diverse coalition. So how will you keep together after that? If you win, how will you keep together with this very diverse policies of yours, and while changing the Hungarian society all over? You were talking about constitution, principles of primary schools, press freedom. It's the entire society that you have to change. How will you do that?
Well, the coalition, of course, I don't know how to keep this group of 6 parties together, but I'm very optimistic. The most successful government in Slovak history was that of Mikuláš Dzurinda, who headed as a conservative a very diverse coalition of 9 parties, including the communists. So, you know, if he managed to do that and he became the most successful prime minister in Slovak history, I'm very optimistic that we can do the same. Myself, a conservative, governing with 6 parties, from national radicalist national right-wing party Jobbik to the Green parties, two small Green parties, Social Democrats, Liberals. So I'm very optimistic on that. And our goal basically is to return Hungary from the brink of a fascist dictatorship where intimidation, corruption, mafia style is part of our everyday life, where betrayal of European and NATO values and practice is commonplace, to the European norm of democracy, rule of law, market economy, and of course, European integration. So I believe we can do this. We have such important tasks to do that everybody feels the responsibility among our politicians. So we could set aside our differences so far in the campaign. We have continued to do that in the coming years. And we are currently working, of course, on winning the elections, and we will focus on maintaining this coalition and being an efficient government afterwards.
Any more questions? Because I would like to have one. Okay. You have met some expat Hungarians living abroad in London 2 weeks ago. Yesterday, you met a lot of Hungarians living in Berlin, and tonight you will be going to Munich to meet Hungarians there. What is your biggest takeaway from these meetings, and what is your most important message to Hungarians living abroad?
Well, of course, my message is that Hungary needs these people. My message that I got was not all Hungarians want to go back to Hungary and live there, which I totally understand and accept. Myself, I lived in North America for more than 5 years. So I understand my friends, my Hungarian friends in North America, most of them did not move back to Hungary. Some of them will never move back to Hungary, of course. Most of them will never move back to Hungary. But they also expressed that they are still concerned about the future of Hungary. They have relatives there. And of course, they never know if when they retire, for example, they still want to come home and live in Hungary. So this community in Berlin, in Munich, in London, and everywhere else in the world, they are invited to participate in our campaign. They can do a lot to help to secure a brighter future for Hungary. They can convince they can vote, first of all, of course. Many of them, of course, they do exercise their voting rights, and we strongly encourage them to do so. I also encourage them to plan their visit to their Hungarian family members for April 3rd, so that they can also cast their vote locally in Hungary. If they have a residence in Hungary, they should register to vote in Hungary so that they can cast 2 votes, not only for the party list, but also for the individual candidate. And I also suggested and asked them to encourage and convince other people, their relatives, they should get reliable, unscreened, unaltered information to them by using our own channels in YouTube and Facebook, instead of all those mastered, manipulated segments misinterpreted by Fidesz. So they can all help, and they can also help financially. Our campaign is financed by micro donations and public donations, so they can all contribute to the common cause. And I use this opportunity to speak a few words in Hungarian, but I also say goodbye to our English-speaking audience. Thank you very much. Now we have to go. We have a train to catch. So, a magyarokhoz szeretnék még végezetül szólni, és különösen is itt nyugaton élő magyar testvéreinkhez. Megértem azt, hogy ha most még sokan úgy gondolják, hogy nem jönnek haza, de valóban az ő érdekük is az, hogy egy olyan Magyarországra jöhessenek haza, akár látogatóba, akár hazaköltözni, amiben én őszintén reménykedek, hiszen én azért hoztam haza a 7 gyermekemet Magyarországra, hogy ők ott nőjenek fel, és magyarok legyenek, magyarul beszéljenek, József Attila versét élvezzék, a magyar konyhát élvezzék, és a többi. Tehát én azt kérem mindannyiuktól, hogy segítsenek minden nap, ha meggyőznek egy-egy embert, hogy szavazzon, hogy menjenek haza, és otthon, azokban a körzetekben, különösen ahol el fog dőlni ez a választás, akiknek ott van otthona, azok legyenek képesek arra, hogy ott élő, regisztrált lakhellyel rendelkező szavazóként szavazhassanak abban a körzetben és az ott induló jelöltekre. Nagyon sok múlik azon, mintegy 800 000 emberen, akitől hát én azt gondolom legalább 500 000 szavazatot várunk, az ő szavazatuk eldöntheti ezt a választást. Ez a választás egyetlen egy szavazaton is múlhat. Én azt kérem mindenkitől, hogy tegyen meg mindent, hogy mi mindannyian adjuk le a szavazatunkat a változásra, aki csak teheti, a billegő körzetekben is szavazzon, ne csak listás szavazatot adjon le, menjen haza, mert Magyarországon biztonságosabb a szavazás, a külképviseleteken nem csak nehezebb, hanem nem is ellenőrzött, ott helyben nem számolják meg a szavazatokat, ki tudja, mi történik, mire Pestre él. Tehát aki csak teheti, ne csak a külképviseleteken, hanem akár otthon is szavazzon, szervezzék meg. Úgy, ahogy már a berlinek megszervezték, a mai napon biztos Münchenben is bejelenthetjük majd, hogy a telekocsi rendszerrel hogy tudják segíteni azt, akinek esetleg pénzügyi okokból nincs ereje hazamenni, de valaki más el tudjak vinni, akár fölajánlásban, akár ingyen is, hogy menjen haza és szavazzon április 3-án, szavazzanak a változásra, hogy Magyarország ne legyen az Európai Unió legszegényebb, leghalálozóbb, elnéptelenedő és legkorruptabb országa, hogy Magyarország végre elinduljon felfelé. Nagyon szépen köszönöm, hogy meghallgattak, tudják, hogy abból a gödörből, ahol Orbán sodorta ezt az országot, a kijárat nem balra és nem jobbra van, hanem csak felfelé. Úgyhogy hajrá Magyarország, hajrá külhoni magyarok. Köszönöm szépen.
Thank you very much also from my side. Thank you for all journalists participating online and here in this room. And thank you also for the German Marshall Fund for hosting this event. And of course, Péter Márki-Zay for having the time for us. And have a nice trip.
Köszönjük szépen, viszontlátásra, és köszönjük szépen.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.